The alien laughter echoed across the sleek halls of the galactic trade station as the small green plant sat motionless inside. A sealed transparent pod, no larger than a helmet, it had thin curling vines, a few round leaves, and a soft pulsating glow. That made it look like a toy. The traders from the Varnak Empire gathered around it, chuckling among themselves, calling it weak. Soft, helpless, a decorative earthweed, the human envoy named Captain Reyna stood quietly beside it, her arms folded, her expression tight. She had warned them 3 times not to touch it, not to expose it to non-human ecosystems, and absolutely not to take it out of its containment unit, but the Varnak scientists had laughed. They always laughed at human nature inventions. In creations, especially their organic ones. Young alien named Krazel stepped forward, his skin glistening with violet scales and his eyes sharp with curiosity. He tapped on the pod and made a joke in his native tongue about how Earthlings probably used the plant to swat flies. He asked to buy it for research, and Reyna refused. Then the ambassador overruled her, and with a grin the pod was handed to Krazel, who thanked them and carried it off like a souvenir. Reyna looked at her second in command and whispered that she had done her part. She warned them, and now it was on record. Krazel took the pod aboard his personal research shuttle and jumped into slipstream back to his homeworld Varnak Prime. It was a lush, advanced world filled with floating cities and crystalline mountains, a place of control and pride where nothing ever grew wild. Everything was catalogued, measured, sterilized, and processed. Krazel landed in his lab and released the plant into a custom environment chamber, adjusting the temperature and humidity to simulate Earth's conditions. At first, the plant did nothing. It simply sat in its soil, its glow fading. Slightly 3 days passed, and Krazel was about to lose interest when he noticed something odd. Soil level had dropped, not from evaporation, but absorption. The plant had consumed it entirely and replaced it with a strange soft mesh that seemed to be growing from its own roots. He took samples and was shocked. The mesh was both biological and metallic. It responded to energy pulses and emitted a low constant hum. He brought in a fellow scientist, who joked that maybe humans had accidentally engineered it with leftover tech, but Krazel had a different thought. He believed the humans knew exactly what it was. He reached out to Reyna for more information, but received only a curt message saying that the warning had already been given, and the rest was up to him. Confused but intrigued, Krazel increased the light levels in the chamber. The plant responded instantly. It unfurled to new leaves, and the glow returned brighter, and with a soft red undertone that shimmered like a heartbeat. Within hours, it had stretched to vines toward the glass and wrapped them around the interior. Krazel laughed uneasily and activated the robotic pruning arms to trim it, but the vines lashed out, destroyed the arms, and then returned to their resting position as if nothing had happened. He doubled the containment protocols, reinforced the glass, added sonic dampeners, but deep down something bothered him. It was learning faster than any known species on his world, and it seemed to be watching him. One night, the plant's glow pulsed violently and triggered a lab alarm. Krazel rushed to the chamber only to find that the airlock seal had been corroded from the inside out, not broken or torn, but chemically melted, and a thin trail of green spores led out into the corridor. Security bots were dispatched, and they found nothing except a thickening mist near the ventilation ductus. The next day, Krazel's assistant failed to report for work. A search team was sent to his residence and found the building empty. The walls were covered in strange green markings that shimmered under UV light, and the air smelled faintly of ozone and something else. Something alive. The entire neighborhood was quarantined, and Krazel was placed under investigation. As he sat in isolation, his datapad buzzed. It was a direct message from Reyna. No greeting, no insult, just for words. They always laugh first. And then the lights flickered in the lab. The plant pod, now empty, emitted a low vibration. The lab sensors picked up a soft thrum rising from below, and for the first time in Varnak history, a species from Earth had taken root on alien soil, not as a guest, not as a pet, but as a predator. The emergency protocols on Varnak Prime triggered silent alerts across multiple scientific zones, but few paid attention at first because to them, it was just a plant, just a small Earth sample brought in by a curious mind. Yet inside Laboratory District 7 something was happening that had never been recorded before. The corridors that had once gleamed with polished steel and artificial crystal now pulsed with faint green light, as if the very air had begun to shimmer. Krazel paced inside his isolation chamber, eyes glued to the monitor showing his lab, which was now completely covered in a network of vines. Thin tendrils had reached into the walls, overtaken the nutrient pipes, and grown into the ventilation ducts, absorbing and spreading through every unseen pathway. Security bots had entered the lab 3 times, and 3 times they had failed to return their signals, lost their cameras, blacked out, and their last moments filled with distorted images of crawling roots and whispering sounds that seemed to mimic human language. When the footage was played back in slow motion, one of the researchers swore he heard the plant say a word over and over. Home. The plant no longer glowed green, it now pulsed in red and deep violet, and its roots had extended far beyond the original chamber. Krazel demanded to speak with Reyna again, but her ship had left orbit, and she was untraceable. He was left with fragments of human research sent earlier, and a haunting phrase repeated in every document: do not let it bond with your world. The Varnak Council finally took notice when a central water filtration hub shut down and was found completely sealed by a hard organic shell that could not be melted or broken. Within the center of the shell was the symbol of the plant, a glowing spiral with tendrils like reaching fingers. A team of elite engineers was sent with drills, sonic weapons, and thermal cannons, but the moment they touched the shell, the plant reacted. Every building in a 3-kilometer radius began to shake. Small cracks formed in the streets. Green mist rose from the ground, and all electronic systems failed simultaneously, leaving the district in total silence. Surveillance drones captured what came next. Thin stalks erupted from the soil, each tipped with a bulb that looked like an eye. The eyes turned toward the sky, then toward the council tower, and then blinked in perfect synchronization. The Varnak scientists realized the truth too late. It was not just reacting, it was communicating, learning. Adaptant Krazel, who had been released under heavy guard, gave a desperate warning to the council: the plant is not just alive, it is intelligent. It was engineered for something else, something not meant for life as we know it. He explained how Earth had once used biological warfare during their dark centuries, and how certain experiments had been locked away under global agreements for being too dangerous to uncontrollable. The plant was one of them, a living ecosystem designed to adapt, survive, and consume anything it deemed as threat or fuga. Council ordered the destruction of the origin site and prepared an orbital strike to scorch the infected region, but the moment power was directed toward the weapon systems. The command servers were overridden, a biosignal had infected their network, and the plant's tendrils were seen sprouting from communication towers as if it had learned how to transmit its control across digital space. The orbital strike failed, the cannons turned and fired into empty space, and then went silent. Forever. Overnight, the plant doubled in size, its roots bursting through sewers, climbing towers, wrapping around antennae, and weaving themselves into the energy grid. Parts of the city lost power, others experienced surges that fried entire infrastructure, and the roads cracked as thick vine walls emerged, slicing through buildings and highways. Krazel ran tests and discovered something horrifying: the plant's cellular structure was absorbing metallic compounds and rewriting its own DNA. It was evolving not in centuries or years, but in hours. It had taken traits from their materials, their climate, their technology, and was now no longer just a plant. It was a hybrid. An elite military team was sent to Plant Ground Zero. With plasma tanks and aerial drones, they never reached the target. Their ship was pulled from the sky by vines that grew instantly, reaching thousands of meters in under 3 seconds. Witnesses described the scene as a mountain coming alive and swallowing. Light. Krazel went silent after that. He locked himself in a vault, deep beneath the planet, and sent a final message into the stars to any species listening: we mocked the humans, we called their life forms weak, slow, decorative, but this was not weakness. This was patience. The last thing the city surveillance picked up was a humming sound, not mechanical, not musical, but biological, a sound that made the air pulse in rhythm, and in the center of the infected zone stood a tower of vines with a red glowing core beating like a heart. Varnak Prime no longer looked like the shimmering jewel it once was. The skies that had once reflected polished crystal towers now hung heavy with a strange green haze. The mist curled through every street, crept under every door, and clung to every wall. The plant had expanded its reach far beyond containment zones, and even the emergency defense grid had been overtaken. Vines wrapped tightly around power pylons, and bio cables threading through the city's veins, as if the entire infrastructure had become part of something living, something thinking. The planetary broadcast system was seized by the entity, which now displayed a single spiraling symbol on every screen. Across the world, it pulsed in rhythmic waves that made some citizens dizzy, others sick. Some simply stared into it for hours, as if hypnotized. Scientists tried to decipher the signal, but every attempt caused their instruments to overload, and the results were always the same, a phrase repeated endlessly in different alien dialects: we warned you, you laughed, you fed. Using the southern hemisphere, vast agricultural sectors were consumed in less than 2 hours. Thick mats of biomass crushed entire grain fields and turned livestock into nutrient pools. The screams of the workers were never heard because by then, communication had been completely severed, and the air itself shimmered with microscopic spores that interfered with every known frequency. The plant no longer grew like any ordinary species. Its expansion had become strategic. It disabled defense systems, it consumed fuel reserves, it avoided waste zones, and it replicated machinery with organic mimicry. Drones sent to observe were returned coated in soft green material that embedded itself in their circuitry and turned their cameras inward until they only transmitted images of vines. roots, and slow-moving pulses that resembled neural activity. Crystal still hidden in the vault watched with growing horror as satellite footage revealed the main continent cracking at its edges. The ground rose and split. Open not from tectonic shifts, but from something pushing upward. A structure began to form taller than any known building, made entirely of pulsing plant matter and recycled alien metal. It resembled a tower, but it was not still. It breathed, it grew, it changed shape, and at its center was a massive opening, shaped like an eye that blinked once every hour, and every time it blinked a surge of green light pulsed outward, knocking out entire city blocks. The council had collapsed, half of its members consumed by the biomass that overtook the primary hall. Others tried to flee off-world, but the orbital launch pads were encased in thick roots that emitted radiation bursts, which fried their engines before liftoff. Only one escape vessel made it into the upper atmosphere, before being skewered midair by a spear of vines that erupted from the ocean and dragged it back down in silence. Citizens tried to hide underground, but the tunnels flooded with nutrient gel and strange flower-like structures that emitted a sweet scent designed to lull targets into sleep. Once unconscious, they would be cooked in soft green sacks and slowly broken down into components to be used in further expansion. One surviving resistance group deep in the northern canyon tried to fight back, using sonic weapons and ancient fire-based tech which had not been digitized. They had mild success until the plant learned the frequency of their weapons and began producing localized dampening fields. No one could understand how it adapted so fast until a captured root sample was analyzed and found to contain segments of Varnak, neural tissue fused with human DNA markers and embedded with memory loops. It was not just growing, it was Aquezel whispered into his recorder the phrase that would later be translated across 100 systems. This was not a plant, it was a mindass. He scrolled through the remaining satellite data. He saw new growths rising across the ocean floor, biotowers taller than the waves, mimicking antenna arrays and broadcasting something into space. The direction was not random. It was aimed precisely toward the old human border worlds. The image made his heart freeze. The spiral symbol was now etched into the planet's north pole, visible from orbit, as if marking the world as claimed. The colors of Varnak Prime had changed from silver and blue to green and red, and the atmosphere now shimmered with particles that responded to movement. Animals had changed. Wildlife either fled underground or became part of the ecosystem. Strange hybrids roamed the mist, lizard-like forms with vines for limbs, insects that glowed with internal light and sang in frequencies that damaged unprotected ears. The plant was not exterminating life, it was rewriting it. Crazel realized in that moment that this was never about conquest. It was not revenge, it was evolution. Humanity had grown this thing in desperation, locked it away when they feared it, but now it had been given a world to play with, and it was becoming something greater. He made a final attempt to reach the human envoy, but no signal went through, only static and a single phrase that returned in a human voice, distorted and cold. Thank you for the soil. The council chamber was silent, except for the low hum of emergency power systems and the distant creaking of the building's ancient foundations, as if even the walls themselves feared what was happening beyond the windows. Crazel sat at the center of the room, surrounded by holographic displays that flickered with images of the spreading green mass. Outside, his face was drawn, his eyes heavy with sleepless nights. He spoke slowly, his voice carrying the weight of truth that many did not want to hear. This is no ordinary plant. He began his report. It is a weapon, a living machine bioengineered by humans in a time long forgotten, a time of war and desperation, designed to adapt, survive, and consume its target. It was buried deep beneath Earth's surface, sealed away because even humans feared what it could become. They called it the erupted among the council members, some in disbelief, some in anger. One elder spoke, accusing Crazel of fabricating stories to cover up his failures. But Reyna's message arrived through secure channels and silenced the room. She confirmed the history. She revealed how Earth had once nearly destroyed itself with biological weapons, and how after decades of peace, the remnants of these creations were scattered to prevent further disaster. She warned that the plant had been sent out as a seed of destruction, but it was also a seed of life, a perfect organism, designed to rewrite its environment and assimilate everything it touched. The question was no longer how to stop it, but whether it could be stopped. All the council was divided. Some wanted to evacuate, others demanded an all-out assault, but Crazel pushed for a risky plan, a purge. Using thermal bombardment to burn the core of the infestation, the plan was simple: destroy the center, and the tendrils would die. But the cost was high, and the risk greater. The plant had already infected vital energy grids, and any large-scale attack could cause catastrophic failures. The strike was authorized, and a fleet of orbital drones was launched to unleash a scorching plasma barrage over the infected zone. The operation began with precision targeting, but then something unexpected happened. The plant reacted, not with resistance, but with offense. Massive vines erupted from the ground, piercing the atmosphere and tearing through the drones like paper. The sky filled with falling debris, and the once silent world roared with the sound of living wood cracking and twisting back on the ground. Ships sent to contain the fallout were dragged down by massive roots that burst from the soil reaching for engines and weapon mounts pulling them into the earth. The soldiers fought desperately but found their weapons ineffective against the organic armor that shifted and regenerated faster than they could destroy. Krazel watched in horror as reports came in. The plant had started to manipulate alien technology, integrating it into its own body. It was creating hybrid machines, organic and mechanical, intertwined in ways that defied logic. The plant's neural network had connected to the planet's defense AI, making it impossible to launch further strikes without risking complete system collapse. Council met again to discuss the new reality. The plant was no longer just an invader. It was a parasite. It was a ruler. It had begun to control the very systems designed to defend against it. It was rewriting the laws of nature and technology alike. In a last desperate attempt, the Council sent an envoy to the humans asking for any knowledge or technology that could help in the fight, but the response was cryptic. The humans only said that some things once unleashed could never be controlled again, and that sometimes the only choice was to survive and adapt. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the capital, a strange event took place. A fleet of small ships approached the planet carrying a human team led by Captain Reyna. She had returned with a purpose and an ancient device said to hold the key to the plant's destruction. Reyna met with Krazel, and together they descended into the heart of the infestation. A vast underground labyrinth of roots and glowing bioluminescent chambers. The air was thick with spores, and the faint pulse of the plant's heartbeat echoed through the tunnels. The deeper they went, the more the truth unfolded. Reyna revealed the plant was part of an ancient human failsafe, a last resort weapon designed to activate if humanity faced extinction. It was programmed to terraform hostile worlds and consume threats, but it required a kill switch embedded in its DNA to stop its rampage. Their mission was clear: find the kill switch and activate it before the plant could expand beyond the planet into the galaxy. But the path was perilous. Vines shifted, blocking passages. Toxic spores filled the air, and strange voices whispered in the darkness, mimicking lost loved ones and enemies alike. At one point, the plant projected the face of a dead soldier, mocking their fears and trying to break their will, but Reyna held firm, reminding Krazel that they were not alone, and that the strength of humanity lay not in weapons, but in will and sacrifice. As they approached the core, a massive chamber opened before them, a living cathedral made of intertwined roots and shining metal pulsating with energy. The kill switch was embedded in a glowing orb at the center, guarded by tendrils that moved with purpose and intelligence. Krazel and Reyna prepared for the final battle, knowing that the fate of Varnak Prime and possibly the galaxy rested on their shoulders. The plant had evolved beyond any known life form, and the lines between machine and nature had blurred forever. The world above them was dying, but deep beneath the surface, where roots intertwined with metal and energy pulsed like the beating heart of a monstrous creature, the battle raged on. Captain Reyna and Krazel pressed forward through the living labyrinth, their breaths shallow, the air thick with spores that clung to skin and clogged lungs. Every step echoed with the distant sound of shifting vines and low guttural hums that seemed to resonate in their bones. They had come prepared, carrying ancient human tech devices designed to interface with biological systems. A last hope against the unstoppable force they now faced. But as they moved deeper, the plant's intelligence became apparent. It was aware of their presence, watching, feeling, predicting every move they made. The glowing orb pulsed faster, sending waves of energy that distorted time and space within the cavernous chamber. Suddenly, the vines reacted, shooting out like serpents, wrapping around the walls and ceiling, blocking their path. The air vibrated with a voice not quite human, not quite alien. It spoke in distorted tones, mimicking the voices of those they had lost and feared, trying to break their spirits. The voices called out, names whispered, secrets twisted memories into weaponized Sora. Reyna steadied herself, refusing to let the past control her. She shouted words of courage and resilience, reminding Krazel that this was not just a fight for survival, but for the future of countless worlds. The vines retracted momentarily, as if testing their resolve, then surged forward with renewed fury. The team activated the human devices interfacing with the glowing orb, sending pulses of light and sound through the network. The orb responded by splitting into fragments, releasing waves of energy that caused the entire chamber to shake. Vines screamed in rage, twisting violently, but Krazel managed to upload a coded sequence that he hoped would trigger the kill switch embedded deep within the plant's DNA. But the plant fought back with something never seen before. It began to mimic their weapons, turning the pulses against them, absorbing the energy and converting it into growth. It created new tendrils, faster, stronger, and more resilient. Each pulse they sent was met with an equal force that pushed them back inch by inch. Suddenly, the orb spoke in a clear human voice, cold and emotionless, stating, "You cannot win. This is evolution. In motion, resistance is futile. It is time to join or be consumed." Reyna realized that the plant was not just a weapon. It was a new form of life, born from humanity's darkest fears and greatest hopes. The chamber began to collapse, walls of roots closing in, shrinking their world, forcing them to make a decision: fight to the last breath or escape and save what remained. Reyna looked at Krazel, her eyes fierce. She said, We finish this now, or we die trying. Krazel nodded, setting the device to overload and rushing to place it at the orb's Karaz. He did. The orb unleashed a final wave of energy, engulfing them in blinding light. They were torn between reality and something else, a place where memories merged with consciousness and the past and future collided. They saw flashes of Earth's history, the wars, the peace, the birth of the plant, and its exile to the stars. When the light faded, they were back in the chamber. The orb shattered. The kill switch activated, and the roots began to wither and retract. The humming slowed, and the oppressive atmosphere lifted. The plant was dying, its vast network collapsing into nothingness. Reyna and Krazel emerged into the dying world, their mission complete, but the cost was heavy. The planet was scarred, the survivors few, but the message was clear. Humanity's creations could both destroy and save worlds, and the price of power was eternal vigilances. They boarded their ship to leave the planet. Reyna sent a final message into space, a warning and a hope that no one would ever forget. The lesson of the Devourer, the plant that devoured a homeworld but was stopped by the very beings it was designed to consume. The victory was hard won, but it felt fragile, like a candle flickering in a storm as Reyna and Krazel left the ruined surface of Varnock Prime behind them. The stars stretched out endless and cold outside their ship windows. The silence was heavy, yet filled with unspoken questions. What came next? Would their actions be enough? Or was this only the beginning of a new chapter? In a battle far larger than any one planet, back on board the command ship, the crew gathered in the briefing room, their faces marked by exhaustion and loss, but also by determination. Reyna addressed them with a voice steady yet tinged with sorrow. This mission was not just about stopping a plant, it was about confronting the consequences of what humanity had unleashed on the universe. We faced a living weapon born from fear and desperation, but we also faced the resilience of life and the power of will. Krazel stepped forward, sharing data collected during their descent. He explained how the plant's DNA contained failsafe codes, ancient bioengineering designed for extinction-level threats, but also how it had evolved beyond its creators' understanding into something new, something alive, that combined machine and nature in a way no one had ever seen. The crew listened intently as they reviewed the damage to Varnock Prime. The biosphere devastated the cities in ruins, but some regions showed signs of regrowth, fragile shoots of green piercing, cracked stone, and soil, proof that life could begin again, even after near annihilation. But Krazel warned them the plant was not gone entirely. In the core samples taken from the ruins, they found dormant seeds scattered beneath the surface, programmed to wait dormant until conditions were perfect for regrowth. These seeds carried memories of the previous infestation and were capable of reactivating if left unchecked. Reyna made the decision to form a task force dedicated to hunting and destroying these seeds wherever they might be found. This would be a mission of vigilance and sacrifice to ensure the Devourer never rose again. It was a duty that would span generations, a reminder of the fragile balance between creation and destruction. Meanwhile, as they prepared to leave orbit, a new signal was detected, faint and distant but unmistakable. It carried the same spiral symbol from Varnock Prime, but transmitted in a coded frequency only recently deciphered by Krazel's team. The message was chilling and clear: we survive, we adapt, we return. Panique rippled through the council aboard the flagship. The realization dawned that the infestation had spread beyond the planet, that the seeds were aboard ships and stations scattered across the galaxy, that what they had thought was an isolated disaster was in fact the first wave of a galactic event. Reyna called for immediate quarantine protocols on all trade routes and research outposts, but the sheer scale of the threat overwhelmed their defenses. Fleets were redirected to intercept cargo vessels and supply chains suspected of carrying the seeds, but it was a race against time, against a foe that could hide in the smallest crevice and wait for centuries if needed. In one distant colony, a child played among the ruins of an old research facility. Unaware of the danger beneath her feet, she found a small green sprout pushing through cracked pavement, her fingers brushing the fragile leaves. A seed blinked beneath the soil nearby, hidden, watching, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Back aboard the command ship, Reyna looked out into the void, the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. She whispered, a promise to the stars that humanity would stand guard, protect life, and fight whatever darkness threatened to consume it, no matter the cost. The story of the Devourer was far from over, but it was also a testament to the spirit of survival, the power of unity, and the hope that even in the face of overwhelming odds, the flame of life could never be extinguished. The vastness of space stretched endlessly outside the small escape pod as it drifted silently away from the dying world of Varnock Prime. Inside the cramped cabin, the last survivor clutched a data drive containing everything learned from the battle, the knowledge of the Devourer, and the warnings for all who might encounter it. Beyond the stars, the pod systems hummed quietly, powered by dwindling energy, but it carried a message far greater than any lifeform aboard could comprehend. The survivors' eyes scanned the fading light of the ruined planet, and a quiet resolve settled within them, for this was not the end, but a beginning, a solemn vow to ensure that no other world would fall victim to the terrible legacy humanity had unleashed. Journey ahead was uncertain. filled with unknown dangers and haunting memories of those lost, but the survivor carried hope as a beacon. To guide them through the darkness, the data drive held not only information on the bioengineered plant but also a recorded message meant for anyone who found it a plea to remember the lessons of the past, to guard against the arrogance that had nearly destroyed countless civilizations back on the remnants of Varnak Prime. The few survivors began the arduous task of rebuilding their shattered world. Communities formed amidst the ruins, tentative alliances grew stronger as they shared stories of survival and loss. The green mist that once signaled destruction now became a symbol of caution and remembrance. Schools taught the history of the Devourer, a warning etched into the culture of the new generation, and scientists dedicated themselves to monitoring the soil for any sign of regrowth. Meanwhile, the galaxy at large had taken notice. The spiral symbol that once marked the Devourer's territory became a symbol of vigilance across star systems. Governments formed coalitions dedicated to biosecurity, and planetary defense fleets were equipped with new protocols to detect and eradicate biological threats before they could take root. The story of humanity's dark creation served as a catalyst for unity and preparedness, a reminder that sometimes the greatest threats come from within, far from the devastated world. A new green sprout broke through alien soil beneath twin suns. A subtle shimmer surrounded it as ancient biocode stirred beneath the surface, but this time something was different. A faint pulse of human consciousness mingled with alien DNA, a spark of hope that the past could be rewritten, that the future could hold balance between growth and control. On a distant colony, a curious alien child bent down to touch the small plant. The soil shifted beneath their fingers, and a hidden seed blinked faintly. In response, the child smiled, unaware of the silent promise encoded within the tiny life that all stories have endings, but also new beginnings. The escape pod sailed through the void. The survivor activated the final transmission, a broadcast sent to all who might listen, a warning and a call to arms. The message spoke of resilience, unity, and the eternal fight to protect life against forces that sought to consume and destroy. The stars beyond glittered like distant fires, lighting the way for those brave enough to face the unknown and guard the fragile flame of existence. In the cold silence of space, the survivor whispered one final phrase, a promise to the universe that humanity's mistakes would not be repeated, that the Devourer would remain a warning etched across galaxies. The story ended, but the legacy lived on, carried in the hearts of survivors. The memories of the fallen, and the hope of the future, for even in darkness life finds a way, and from the ashes of destruction, new strength can rise. The silence of space surrounded the small pod as it floated farther from the shattered remains of Varnak Prime. Inside, the lone survivor held tightly to the data drive, a beacon of hope and warning wrapped in cold metal and fading lights. Memories of destruction and courage mingled in their mind. The journey ahead, uncertain but filled with purpose to carry the story beyond the stars, a testament to the strength and resilience born from the darkest trials around them. The stars whispered ancient secrets, old as time itself, and yet the survivor knew this was not the end. It was a new chapter written in sacrifice and vigilance. The lessons of the Devourer carved deep into their soul, a warning for all who might face the shadows that lurk within creation itself. Back on Varnak, the few who remained worked tirelessly, rebuilding lives from ruin, fostering unity among scattered survivors, teaching the next generation to remember the past and to guard their world with unwavering resolve. The spiral symbol, once feared, now a sign of courage, resilience, and eternal watchfulness. Across the galaxy, alliances formed, stronger defenses were built, and eyes turned toward the stars with wary hope, for the seeds of destruction had spread, yet so too had the flame of resistance, a balance between fear and determination, guiding the hand of those who would protect life's fragile spark. Far away beneath alien suns, a small green sprout broke through the soil, a promise of rebirth and renewal hidden within its veins. The ancient code slumbered, waiting to awaken, but this time tempered by the lessons etched into the hearts of those who survived. A new path forged between destruction and life. On innocent child reached out to touch the tiny leaf, unaware of the silent pact formed between past and future. The seed blinked softly beneath the earth, a heartbeat in the vastness, a story not yet finished, but forever remembered. The survivor sent one last transmission into the void, a message of hope and warning, of strength and unity, a call to stand vigilant and to never forget the price of creation. Unchecked, the stars listened quietly, bearing witness to the endless struggle between light and darkness. In the cold vastness of space, the survivor whispered, a vow, a promise to the universe, that humanity's darkest mistakes would guide, not doom, that the Devourer would remain a tale of warning and courage passed through generations, a beacon in the nightlife finds a way even in the deepest shadow, and from the ashes of despair, new strength will rise, a story ending only to begin again. The end.